Hello, and welcome to a special live episode of Deprogrammed. We are airing, it's not our usual time. If you're listening to this later, we did it early today. Sorry, we did it at 2 p.m. I'm so excited about my guest today. This is a woman who I originally met doing the Women Leaving the Left panels. Her name is Michelle Evans. She is a fellow Texan, and she is running for office in district, I believe it's 136. Let's see if she can
Yep.
correct me.
No, that's
Please
correct.
welcome Michelle.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me.
Hi. So I'm just going to tell people who might be watching and not listening, that third imaginary person there is Michelle's audio. So that's what that is, which is fine.
I'm a little technologically inept when it comes to this. So
I love it. Your mom, you said before we started, you're like, I'm in my daughter's bedroom today, which is
the
really
K-pop
cute.
posters.
Yeah, K-pop. I was asking you right beforehand, what is that? All the young people I know are really into K-pop.
It's like Korean boy band
Yeah,
stuff.
but I guess it's just more of the boy band stuff because I went through a boy band phase as well.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
you
You
know,
and I are about the same age, so New Kids
yeah,
was a thing.
there you go. New Kids on the Block.
Hmm.
So, you're running for office, and for anyone who is not familiar with you, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself and what what compelled you to put yourself into a political arena?
Well, first and foremost, I am a mom. I'm a mom of three kids, ages 9, 11, and 14. And most importantly, that sort of forms my worldview and my values. But one of my kids has some special needs. She's deaf. She's got a genetic disorder. There's a laundry list of stuff. So her needs and the experiences that my family went through, sort of navigating that world, has really informed my viewpoint and my perspective. Back in 2015, myself and a couple of other moms, both of whom also have special needs kids, helped, or I guess we came together and founded Texans for Vaccine Choice. And that is focused solely on Texas state legislature and how it decides or forms vaccine choice policy or informed consent policy, vaccine tracking, et cetera. And so state legislature is really where my knowledge base and my
Mm.
passion has been since then. And last year, I'd kind of had my head in the sand for a few years, just focusing on my home. And then, of course, last year it became sort of a ticking time bomb locally. So mostly school board issues, curriculum, actually, vaccine mandates really came to the forefront again. And I decided that it was time for me to throw my hat in the ring because, you can advocate and be an effective advocate. You can be an effective activist, but there's something to be said for actually being directly involved in articulating issues and getting involved in writing good policy.
Mm-hmm.
So my goal is to kind of protect the families of Williamson County in my area by becoming involved in crafting good policy that ensures their future.
Mm-hmm. Can you tell me about some of the stuff that helped you to wake up in the past year? Because you mentioned briefly like school board stuff, curriculum
Mm.
stuff, reading lists, things like that. And
Yeah.
I lived in Georgetown for a while, and I was always hearing stuff out of Round Rock, which is where you're at,
Yes.
and just how things were a little bit, in my opinion, more authoritarian there. Can you tell me a little bit about what was going on in the Round Rock schools?
Gosh, it was like a list of things not to do. I think we gained a lot of notoriety nationwide, and I would prefer to be known for good reasons. But Round Rock ISD became sort of the epicenter of school board politics last year, not just because of their masking policy, which was an affront to our governor's executive order about not masking children and not forcing masks on children and teachers. They would double down on that. Initially, at the beginning of the year, they actually said, if you're going to opt yourself out, we have to see a doctor's note and we need to be able to contact your doctor to verify this information, which is an egregious overreach. And because parents flooded these school board meetings, they became much more contentious. They began restricting how much time we would have to speak on any matter. They restricted the seating inside of the boardroom kind of arbitrarily from month to month or meeting to meeting. A couple of fathers at two separate school board meetings spoke in a manner that would be considered out of turn, and were removed from those meetings, and then subsequently were arrested on a later date, both arrested on a Friday evening, kept in jail overnight until
For
Saturday morning.
speaking out of turn?
Yes. Yeah, It was a
Wow.
Class A misdemeanor for disturbing the peace, I think, by disrupting a public meeting. One of them was in last August, was speaking about the superintendent because there were some questions as to the superintendent's qualifications. And then after he was hired, he was accused of domestic abuse by his mistress.
I read about this guy.
Yes.
Here's
Actually came across your comments yesterday.
Oh, wow. Here's the hits. One of my friends, who's in Williamson County, was saying, you have to check this guy out. And it was this crazy story, news articles about he's married, but he also had a mistress who accused him of domestic assault. And
Yes.
then also was pregnant and claimed that he tried to force her to have an abortion, which she didn't do. It became very contentious. There were these allegations flying, and he's still there despite all of the drama.
Correct.
Around
So
him.
earlier this year, at the beginning of this year, the Texas Education Agency, which oversees all districts in Texas, recommended that he be placed on administrative leave, paid administrative leave. So he was making $30,000 a month while he was on admin leave. And while a third-party investigator went into the records and took statements, and ultimately they reinstated him, but the investigators' report recommended against that. So it's an ongoing drama in our district, and is sort of at the basis of a lot of this political heat that's back and forth. But it's just over the course of the last year, it's like masks, the superintendent, boys and girls restrooms, these arrests, and school board members fighting amongst each other, attempting to censure each other, and lawsuits. It's just been a hellscape here locally. And honestly, nobody on either side is happy with anything that's going on.
Yeah. I know you guys also had some of the same concerns in Round Rock that I've seen playing out across the country and school board meetings about some of the reading material that was being given to kids.
Specifically in Round Rock, it was more about what's available in the library and the book vetting process, whether or not we just take these wholesale boxes of books and put them on the shelves without, reviewing them for content, or if there's like a review process, which there is, but it's very long and slow and typically doesn't end up well for anybody that's questioning the book. We have some, what I would consider to be activist teachers who are very clear in their intent to expose children, and in the case that I'm aware of, special ed children, to ideas like polyamory, telling them that they need to empower themselves by exploring their identity and their sexuality. And these are elementary aged 504 kids and special ed kids.
Wow. Why do you think is there a special emphasis on that kind of, in my opinion, it's indoctrination, but I know they would call it something else, outreach. Is there a
Yeah.
special emphasis you think on special ed kids? Is it different than the general population of kids in the public schools?
Um, I don't know if it's a chicken or egg issue. I have spoken to a woman in this community who has taught ASL for quite a long time, and she said that the deaf child community has just always been kind of ripe for people to come in and take advantage of them. And I don't know if it's because it's such a close-knit, inclusive community. Like they have their own culture, and they're very trusting of people who are a part of the culture. So I'm not really sure, but this was specifically some Dep Ed instructors that I was listening to.
Wow. And so as a parent, you're seeing all this unfold around you in your school district. And did you experience, I know I've heard you talk about you've experienced some of this, like some of the, I guess, repercussions of ideology and stuff in your life as a mom
Yeah.
with your
Uh-huh.
kids. Are you
Yeah.
comfortable talking about any of that?
Sure. So I have two daughters. My oldest is about to be 15. And when she was 12, when she was in sixth grade, she confided in me that she was attracted to same sex. She was attracted to girls. Um, and, I understand she's 12. And so, like, this is going to change. Some attitudes are bound to change over time. Um, and I wasn't going to come to her from a place of like condemnation or judgment. So we just kind of give her room to learn and be very clear with the fact that like you're 12, you're 13, you're 14, you're too young to act on any of this anyway. But soon after she confided in me, she came to me with this button that says, "My pronouns are they, them." And she gave it to me without, it was like posted without caption. She just kind of gave it to me. And I said, no, I, there's a line that I draw. I mean, there's kind of subjectivity, and then there's reality. And the reality is that I carried her, I birthed her, I've raised her, like changed her diapers, all of that stuff. So I know what she is and who she is. And I wanted to emphasize to her, like, you are a woman and you can't change that. And that's good. Like, that's a really good thing. There's nothing wrong with that. And honestly, after very open discussion about that, but it was very brief, she kind of abandoned the idea and hasn't gone back to it. In fact, when she recalls those times, she's like, I can't believe I did that. But she had gotten the button from someone at school.
Yeah. I mean, I'm so grateful for you sharing this story because, I mean, the first word that came to mind or term that came to mind as you're sharing it is I wrote down reality based, which is where the phrase based comes from. Do you ever get called a based mom?
I have not yet, but it's a goal. It's a life goal.
A life goal to be called based mom.
Yeah.
Well, reality based because my suspicion is I'm not a parent. But I'm in a lot of I see a lot of what goes on in these parents groups on Facebook, parents of transgender kids, and most of the groups, with one exception that I know of, there's real orthodoxy in the groups where the parents are trained um, to react in only one way only, and that is to validate anything and everything the child says, even if they change their mind consecutively, even if they have concerns or questions or think there might be some other root cause or trauma there, they're told to validate, use the desired pronouns, begin pursuing going to gender clinics and pursuing medical and surgical transition, and to immediately do all these things. And then the other thing I see in these groups a lot of the times, well, first of all, anyone who disagrees or offers other advice is banned. They have a long list of rules. So they only hear this one orthodoxy. And about once a month or so, I see these tragic posts from parents of kids who've committed suicide or tried to commit suicide. and the parents are usually saying, trigger warning, they post about it, and then they say, but I did everything right according to this group, right? Like I did the pronouns, I did this, I validated that my kid's in a completely supportive environment, trans positive environment. Why did this happen? And I always wish that they could hear stories of parents who took a different approach and see what the outcome might be. Because my suspicion is that perhaps your child is looking for some grounding in
Yeah.
truth and reality, and if there's no boundaries, if they come to the parent and it's just completely whatever you say goes, even if it's not reality based, that can, I think, could make a kid feel very rootless.
Right.
And I mean, do you have that? That's a lot of me saying a lot of things, but do you have that sense too? Or do you feel like you did the right thing?
My parenting approach has never been very like cookie cutter. I'm just very instinct driven. So in that moment, it was like whatever, it just came out. It was like my immediate response. And it's something, these gut responses from moms are something that we really need to acknowledge and respect. Just like gut responses in girls that have a boy come into their bathroom that like, this is uncomfortable. This is not right. We really need to honor the fact that as women, we have that instinct and it's strong and it's there for a reason. But so just to go back to, I didn't really go respond to her intentionally in any way. It wasn't like I thought about it for a while and made sure that I said the right things in the right way to not hurt her feelings. And perhaps I should have, but at the same time, it was like, this was just such an immediate, like hard line for me. Not only because they, them makes absolutely no grammatical sense to me whatsoever, but
Yeah.
I don't see anything. I know that a 12-year-old is going through a lot of chaotic changes, emotional changes, and to accept that in that moment would have been a complete course like change for us. Like it would have had such a cascade of subsequent changes. I knew in that moment that was something that we were not going to fall into.
Wow.
So and she came to me, I asked her at that time, I was like, well, what about your dad? Her dad and I are not together. Are you going to ask him? Are you going to ask your grandparents? Because he was living with his parents at the time. And her answer was no. So I kind of understood that she was coming to me for a reason. And it may not have been looking for affirmation. It may have just been like looking for some sort of other type of validation. Like maybe she understood that this wasn't the direction she wanted to go into, but
like deep down.
Yeah.
Right. So how has this informed your platform? Actually, before we get to your platform, I just want to know about the decision to go into politics. And one of the things we talk about at Deprogrammed is I think that I don't care so much about national politics anymore. But I'm very interested in local politics. I think it's really important who's on the school board, who's on the city council, who your state representatives are. And I kind of think that most of the time the people who run for office are maybe not the best people. Maybe it's the people who have motivations based in fame, money, power. And I wish that there were more reluctant leaders who decided, I need to do this because no one else is doing it and somebody has to. What is that decision-making process like? Is it scary?
No, going back to the fact that I just kind of I lead with my gut. I looked at the new map because we had redistricting based on the 2020 census, and that was finalized in late November of last year. So I happened to be looking at the new maps and realized I'd been drawn into a different district. And already the people in my previous district had stepped up, strong voices had stepped forward to run in that previous House district, but nobody in mine. And I was like, well, okay, so this is kind of a turn of events. My husband was on his way out the door to go to work, and I was like, I'm gonna run for House. And he was like, well, I don't like any of it, but go ahead. um, so it was a very like quick decision, not one that I regret in any way. I like you, like I'm very focused on local city and state politics over national. I don't pay attention to much to the national news. Because this is really where the sausage is made, like what affects you and your
Yeah.
home and your wallet more than anything. Um, so it's just, I feel like it's an opportunity. There's, to be really frank, like the district was redrawn in a way that favors Democrats, and I am running on the Republican ticket, so I've got a challenge ahead of me.
Mhm.
But what an opportunity this would be to sort of right the ship here,
Yes.
and get not only somebody with a fresh voice, a woman, a mother of three, special needs mom, someone who has a passion for personal liberty, for freedom, and has kind of lived through some of these issues when it comes to like ideology, and how
Mhm.
that's affected the home and how it affects certain populations more so than others. And I really appreciate the opportunity here to at least get this viewpoint out to the public,
Yeah.
because I'm running on the Republican ticket, so I'm surrounded constantly more so by older white gentlemen than I am anybody else, which is, it's fine, but maybe they need to have exposure to a conservative feminist. There's not very many of us. Um, to somebody who grew up um, around the LGBT community. I had a gay uncle. My best friends in high school were gay guys, and I used to go to Montrose all the time when I was in high school, the Montrose section of Houston, which was, that's where a lot of gay culture was. And it wasn't anything I was taught to despise or be afraid of. Um, and I kind of have a more libertarian stance when it comes to those social issues,
Mhm.
unless we're talking about children. Then it becomes like, there's a strong boundary there that we need to identify and respect when it comes to children.
And parents.
Well, and parents' rights, especially. But, I get questioned all the time. Like you say that you're all for parental rights, but you won't let a parent take their child for, puberty blockers or wrong sex hormones or anything like that. But those are two wildly different areas of policy. Like having strengthening the rights of parents to know exactly what they're being taught and exposed to in public schools is one thing, but defending the rights of a child who has no informed consent, that's a completely different area. It's not, to me, a parent's rights issue. It then becomes that child's rights.
Right. I absolutely agree. I mean, I think there's a huge difference between parents' rights to raise their child with their belief system and a
Mm-hmm.
parent's rights to physically interfere with their kid, whether it's what we traditionally know of as physical abuse or what I think is abusive, allowing kids to have medical and surgical transition before they're old enough to really comprehend the sometimes permanent effects.
Yes,
Um,
oftentimes, yeah.
I want to back up and ask you, I'm a big fan of defining terms because we're living in crazy times where words mean different things to different people now.
Right.
um, can you define when you said you're a conservative feminist? What does that mean? Last night we did a pop culture episode and we were talking about Archie Bunker and Norman Lear. And we found an article where Norman Lear described himself as a bleeding heart conservative. And so we had to pick apart what that meant. And so I hear conservative feminist. I'm like, what does that mean? Tell me what that
Right.
is.
I would probably consider you as somewhat of a conservative feminist, but I am pro-life, anti-abortion. I feel like there should be very few exceptions, um, and absolutely not, in later term. I feel like, when all is, circumstances are equal, when we're all given the same life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, women and men are not equally capable of the same things, but they're equally capable of achieving what it is that they put their interest and skills towards. So I think that a woman has a right to reproduce, and if she doesn't want to, she shouldn't feel like she has to in order to attain a particular level in our society. So I just feel like women should have access to equal opportunity, but we're not going to ever have an equitable outcome there.
What you just said is hate speech. And if we were
I
in the UK, I'd be
know.
reporting you.
I know. The memes, I would be arrested just for my memes. Yeah, it's hard. I know that, it's hard to hear, I guess, that you can't have everything you want, and you are not guaranteed happiness. You're guaranteed the pursuit of it.
The pursuit of it.
Right. There's a
Equal
huge difference. Right.
Yeah.
And this drive to make it so that everybody has the same outcomes, I think, is just, it's insanity, because what happens when all things are perfect and you're still not getting the outcome that you want? Like, you're going to have a lifetime of disappointment and
yes. Let me tell
misery.
you, Michelle, I noticed this when I used to be a leftist and I worked in entertainment, and I saw this happen a few times, but one time I really paid attention to it. There was a person a comedian I represented who, and these kind of life lessons are great because you can see yourself in other people sometimes more easily than you can see, oh, I'm doing that too, or whatever.
Yeah.
But I could see that he was sort of, I'll be happy when I get this. And then whatever that is, like a book deal, a TV show, whatever, these measurements of success. And then that thing would happen and he would become more miserable. And I think it was only because you're not fixing the root problem. You're looking for outside like achievements to bring you that. And there's there's something off there. I'm just rambling now, but
no, I talked to an executive at a local bank recently, and he's like, I just had like the fifth person quit. They work for 2 weeks and then they quit because it's just not bringing them joy. I'm like, well, it's a bank, that brings very few people joy. And straight out of college, you're unlikely to find that thing that just brings you such fulfillment that you never have to switch careers or jobs again. Like, that's a flash in the pan kind of thing. And even I was talking to my hairdresser, and she was like, well, I knew very early on that I wanted to be a hairdresser, but she also had to put in time as an assistant. She had to get the proper education. She had to take her lumps and take on clients that she didn't want to take on just because of money. But now she's at a point in her life where she can say no, and she has that agency. So now she feels fulfilled by it, but it wasn't always the case.
Did you ever have an idea when you were younger that you might go into politics?
Oh, no, not at all. Gosh, when I was really young, I thought I was going to be an actress, but you learn very quickly when you're around people with true talent that you are outworked without even having to try.
What about being a mom? Did you always see yourself being a mom?
Oh gosh, I did, and then I didn't. And then I was in my late 20s and figured it just wasn't going to happen. I was like 28 or something like that, and I figured my days were gone and it's fine, I'll just focus on me. And then I got pregnant. And then went on to have 2 more kids. And I love being a mom. It's hard, it's challenging, it's really heartbreaking at times, but it's something that I feel like I'm pretty good at, and my kids tend to agree with it. So we keep doing it,
So this is something I wanted to bring up with you. And we're kind of, you and I are going to be, I should have said that at the beginning. For anyone who's interested, we're going to be doing an event together, another Women Leaving the Left event. in Round Rock on September 30th.
Mhm.
It's you, me, Megan Murphy, Antonia. What's her middle name?
Okafor
Okafor
cover.
cover. Antonia Okafor cover. And I'll drop the link in the chat and in the description. But as part of that event, one of the ways that we were describing it is breaking the political binary.
Mhm.
We live in, I think, very interesting times. And like I said, a lot of words don't mean the same thing. If somebody says they're liberal or conservative or anti-racist or whatever, I'm like, I need you to define what that word means, what you
Yeah.
mean by it, right? So what do you think, what unique like challenges does that bring, and also maybe benefits in running for office on a Republican ticket?
Well, I can tell you in my district, in particular, there are a, a large swath of swing voters, particularly women, moms. But there are times when I go to the door. So this shirt says Republican. I go to the door and it's like this immediate wall is put up, like, oh God, you're a Republican. Um, and then I try to break down that wall, and we have like just a really open discussion, like, what concerns you? Tell me, I'm here to listen. Um, and I've said for months now, like, this is not necessarily going to be, it's definitely not going to be a battle of who is the most conservative, but my job is to, uh, quote unquote, sell conservatism to people who don't really understand how it can benefit them. So policies like, lower taxes and smaller government, and less bureaucracy and more freedom and more liberty, how that can really benefit them, and how it applies to some of those kitchen table issues like economy and jobs and education and public safety. So it's funny because you put yourself on the Republican ticket, or you call yourself conservative, and I do think that I have conservative values. But some people, there's a litmus test out there for some where they're like, well, you're not conservative enough, or if you're not out there, really loudly talking about, conservative this, conservative that, or talking about my stance on abortion. Why would I talk about my stance on abortion to someone who doesn't really care, that's not really that invested in the issue? If it doesn't matter to them, it's not my job to shout in their face. Doing women leaving the left, the first one, I got a lot of questions like, well, you're conservative. What are you talking about leaving the left? Or,
Because you're
what's
one who hasn't, the one on our panel who hadn't.
right.
You've always been
Yeah.
conservative?
I've always kind of sat on the line of like libertarian, conservative, somewhat socially, more open-minded. So it's been kind of this weird journey, I guess. I hate that word, but political journey. And as I've gotten older, gotten more years into motherhood, it's become clearer to me that conservative values are not only what we were created upon in this country, but also what could right the ship in this country and in our state. So yes, I've never was Marxist, progressive, socialist, social justice warrior, none of that. And so it was an odd fit, I guess, to be on that panel for some. I felt very comfortable with it, but people were like, I don't get what you're doing there, and why would you be with these people?
I love that you were there. Well,
Yeah.
tell me why you think you were there, because I know why you were there.
I just think that, it was funny to listen to the intros because it was like Marxist, full blown admitted former Marxist, and you were social justice warrior. And Mary Lou, I feel like she and I have the same views when it comes to personal autonomy. We just kind of define it in some ways differently, but she's definitely old school liberal. So I think I was there just because it's like, there is a there is a safe space for you ladies elsewhere outside of the left. And the fact that we're talking about discourse, and we're talking about political spectrum, and being a little bit more of a welcoming environment than this like purist kind of leftist stance where you're either with us 100% or you're not with us at all.
Yes.
I think that there's room for a lot of gray area.
Yes, and I think one of my favorite panel discussions was the video panel that we did on Megan's channel ahead of time about abortion, because we all had such different opinions on it, and I loved having you on the panel. I'm excited to do the upcoming one with you, because I think the point is that this whole binary is restrictive. This idea that you must be solely in this party or this party, which we don't live in that world anymore. It's not as important to me if you are a Republican or a Democrat or you don't have a party. I don't have a party currently.
Yeah.
So I think it makes total sense to me.
Yeah. And there's something to be said for voting for your values, and maybe for somebody like you, it doesn't necessarily mean voting straight Republican from top to bottom. That could mean, maybe you throw in a vote for a libertarian, or maybe you throw in a vote for a Green Party. I don't know anything about the Green Party, but, and maybe you do vote for a Democrat that you think has spoken to you about the issues that mean most to you. I think a majority of Americans fall in that category where they just kind of, well, I will say a lot of voters are just ill-informed, and they go to the ballot box and either they do straight ticket or they just vote in like 3 races and they're done. But the rest are they're just leading with what matters to them in what's in their face right at that moment, whether it's the fact that they lost their job because of COVID restrictions, or because they knew somebody that died from COVID, and so they're super pro-vaccine, or whatever. It's really what makes an impact on your life on a daily basis, and most recently, before you go to the polls. That's kind of what people have fresh in their minds and what influences their vote. So, like you said, most people don't exist in that binary, and we have to acknowledge that.
Yeah. What do you think makes you so like you said, you're the one person on the panel who wasn't like a leftist at some point. What made you immune? Do you know?
Well, my parents have always been Republican, at least the entire time I've been alive. And they have always talked about, hard work and results, and have never given me any excuse or any reason why I shouldn't be able to do the things that I want to do. They've always been extremely supportive as long as I'm able to put in the work. I'll admit that they paid for my college outright, so it's not like I've ever had to deal with student loans, although I have had to file for bankruptcy because of, I've got got Barkers too, because of medical bills related to my children. And but I was raised with those kind of ideals, like you love your country, and it may not be perfect all the time, but you are proud of where you came from, and you just work really hard to achieve the things that you set your mind to. And I don't know if that made me immune from certain aspects of progressivism, but everybody goes through a phase in their 20s where they're like, oh, I just want to do the best for everybody. I want everybody to be happy, and I want, everybody to be taken care of. And I snapped out of that pretty quickly when, you get you pay your first income tax bill or something like that. There's always something, but
yeah. Or maybe you look at how to actually manifest that in a different way.
Right.
Like I started to realize, because I had a lot of prejudice and stereotypes about the right and about conservatives and Republicans, and I used to think that they didn't care about people. And it took me a long time to realize, only within the past 4 years or so, that they care very much. They just have different ways and different beliefs about how to best take care of people and do no harm. And so I think that's one of the biggest problems for the divide, maybe, is that um, if you not realizing sometimes that the person on the other side of the aisle might have the same what as you, but like a different
Mhm.
how, how to
Right.
do it.
Yeah.
And in a lot of times, at least on the left, I'll speak about the left because that's where I came from. On the left, there's this tendency to immediately say, "Oh, they don't agree with me on this policy. Well, they must hate people. Like they must
Mhm.
not." It's like, no, maybe they want to do the best for people too, and they think this policy doesn't.
Right.
You know.
And it's, this place of compassion, and where you go from there is what kind of determines your political stance, I guess, is do I think that I know best for you and that I can take care of you better than you can take care of yourself? And so I'm going to put all these constructs in place to fight against what you want to do or how you would typically live your life, and make you sort of, I guess, dependent? Or am I going to let you make your best decisions and be there in case something catastrophic happens, but otherwise, you know, you are able to pursue whatever you want to pursue in your own time on your
Mhm.
own? I do believe that there's a role for government in helping the most vulnerable populations. I have a daughter who's got extensive needs. And so I get where the state and federal government can play a role in helping families that have those sorts of challenges. I just don't think that the government knows best how to take care of people.
The government is not your dad.
Yeah,
I think that's another big lesson I've been learning. It's like
yeah,
it's not your parent.
right. Big Daddy
Yeah.
government's not your friend.
Yeah. Um, so what advice, I want to ask you some questions here for like advice for people who might be listening or watching. Um, if you're a parent
Mm.
and you're concerned about what's happening in the schools, in the public schools, you have kids in public schools, like what kind of advice would you give for parents?
First of all, I would say reach out to other people in your community, because the likelihood is that there are a lot of people like you, and it's better to form kind of a community where you can all communicate with each other, but also, you know, there's strength in numbers, and each person has a talent that they can bring to it. So whether it's like writing form letters for people to email out, or speaking at board meetings, or delving into the law and seeing where they may be violating it. Like get yourself a tribe that will help you fight it, but also um, understand that you're up against a monster. Like the public education system, for all of its amazing things that it provides to our society, is very flawed, because it's created by governments, created by humans, and people just, especially after graduating from these universities, they bring their own biases into the classroom, and they sometimes cannot shut that off, and sometimes they're very intentional about being out in the open with it. So and you've got teachers unions that condone and embolden these people, that to administrators especially, to I guess perpetuate certain things, and they
Mhm.
lobby really hard at the state and federal level to have things like SEL in classrooms, which sounds so benign, but underneath it all is not great for kids or families or teachers. So know what you're up against, form an army, and be pretty relentless. I mean, don't perseverate on certain things. Like, make sure that you are getting the right messaging out, and that you're focusing your energy in a way that is effective and efficient.
Mhm. What about for people who, we're talking about reluctant leaders and deciding to run for office, whether it's for school board or, city council, or like you're doing for state representative? What advice would you have for people who are like, I wish somebody would step up and do this and this and this, but it can't be me.
Right.
Right.
And we've seen that a lot with trying to recruit people to run for a school board. There's a lot of people in the background that are like, you should do it. You should do it. Like, I'm so angry about all these things. You should fix it. And I don't like that idea that the thing is like, you're asking somebody to make the sacrifice that you're not willing to make. Because to be honest, like there's a lot of times where I feel like my family might be at risk, or my daughter may be like, people say things to her in school, and it is a huge sacrifice of time and energy. But if you really believe in something, then that's absolutely worth it. This is just kind of a season of my life where I'm just completely head down doing the work, and I'm not getting to see the kids as much as I want to. But in the end, I think it's going to be worth it for this community in this state if we're able to flip this seat. But I remind people all the time, there are almost zero qualifications to run for office. And maybe that's a good thing, maybe that's a bad thing. But if you're waiting for the right time and the right education and the right experience, it's never going to come. Just do it. There's going to be people that will support you and back you. And as long as you are willing to give that time up, I think it's important for, quote unquote, normal people to do this. At the very beginning, I was asked like, oh, are you an attorney? No. Do you have like a big business? No. Because that's all there is down there. With the exception of this one woman that got into office a couple of sessions ago, and all she did was like own a bird shop in Austin or in Houston. And she, I think, won her race on like $1,000. That's lightning striking. That's not common, but it really takes, I hate to say, like, no qualifications, no knowledge, no experience necessary.
I love that you're saying it. You, Michelle, you, by the way, are rare. And I know this because what I was going to post, you guys, there's a group in Round Rock, Texas. It's 35,000 members. It's called People Round Rock on Facebook. And I was like, I'm going to put our event in there because we're doing this event in Round Rock on September 30th. Michelle's going to be there. I'm going to be there. And I asked her, since she's running, I'm like, do you mind if I post this in that group? Because they'll probably get upset. Because the group, some of these groups, there's sometimes woke people running them or what have you.
Mm-hmm.
Do you? And she said, no, I don't care if you post it. So I posted about our event, which again, it's for the politically homeless. If
Right.
you look at the people on the panel, we're not sponsored by one party or anything. You're running as a Republican. I don't have a party. I don't know about Megan. Like everybody, we're not like, join this party, do this,
Right.
So I posted the event. And not only did Michelle not care that I posted there, you went in and posted a comment. And she said, I'm so excited to bring this event to my home turf. And she spelled it TERF, which is the slur they use against us.
Yeah. As though I'm a radical feminist. But I mean, at some point you just have to embrace this idea that you are the enemy, that just kind of like, it is what it is. They're going to hate me if I don't say anything. They're going to hate me if I do. And I am who I am. Like, I'm pretty unapologetic about who I am. And I'm an open book. So I don't leave anything in secret.
I love that.
It's to my detriment at times,
but you're rare. It's a beautiful thing to see. I was like, oh, she doesn't care. Like, she's just herself. So, can you tell me a little bit about, I don't know how much longer I have with you, probably not much longer. Just tell me what are the most important things about on your platform that you want people to know? The election's coming up in November, and I'm going to put up here on the screen your website if people want more info, michelleevans4texas.com. She's running in the Round Rock area. But yeah, what are the takeaways that you want people to have?
So I have a little bit of Austin in my district, the Williamson County portion of Austin. And if anybody has been watching what has happened in Austin the last 2 to 4 years, you'll understand, like, the Austin that I used to know and love is gone. It's now full of homeless encampments. It's very much going the way of Seattle, Portland, San Francisco, because of the city council that they have, the mayor that they have. And they also have a very liberal base of state representatives who kind of condone that or enable it. So public safety is huge. Working against any kind of defund effort, making sure that police are supported, trained, and we're taking things on a case by case basis. We're not painting everybody with a broad brush. Obviously, vaccine mandates are extremely important to me, and I don't think that anybody should have to consent, quote unquote, consent, or be coerced into a shot in order to keep their job, in order to keep their right to education. And obviously the gender ideology thing is huge for me, and not everybody wants to hear it, but that is something that is extremely important to me as a mother of girls. And my son needs to understand it too. But I've reached out to a current legislator about trying to draft my first bill kind of preemptively before elected, just to be prepared. But it would be to prevent men from being housed with women in residential facilities or prisons that are obviously publicly funded.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
That alone, I am tired of hearing stories in the US and the UK and elsewhere of men raping women in prison, and then in the news articles, them calling him she, showing that respect of using the cross-sex pronoun when you've done something so undeserving of respect.
Right. Nobody should be able to self-identify where they're going to be imprisoned. If they've been convicted of a crime, you get what you get.
I lost you just on that last sentence.
Just if you've been convicted of a crime, particularly a violent crime, and these are the most marginalized women. This is the most marginalized population in our country, is imprisoned women who have been likely in a cycle of abuse, either sexual abuse or physical abuse, throughout their life, and then to subject them to further abuse and rape and sexual assault, I just think is the lowest kind of treatment you could give to any other human being. I mean, you're subjecting them to this like social experiment that cannot end well. So that would be the first bill that I want to draft. But I also want to support ending the educational exemption for obscenity distributed to minors, so that parents have a mechanism by which they can say, like, my child should not be able to read genderqueer in 4th or 5th grade and see this graphic novel that shows fellatio and whatever else is in there. I haven't looked at it in quite a while, but
yeah, I remember that is in there.
Yeah. So currently 43 states have this exemption, and Texas is one of them. And it's the reason that you cannot prosecute teachers oftentimes who provide pornographic material if it's deemed educationally beneficial. So I would support that. Absolutely.
I like that you're going in guns blazing. It's reason enough to vote for you, my opinion. So
go big or go home.
Go big or go home, and don't mess with Texas. Michelle.
That's right.
Michelle Evans, everybody. I really encourage you. I'm just very happy that I had you on the show. I encourage you guys all to go check out her website, even if you're not in Texas. Maybe it'll give you an idea for running where you're at. MichelleEvansForTexas.com. I appreciate you being here today, and good
thank
luck.
you so much. I love having you in my life. You're fun. You're always smiling, and I love it.
Oh, well, we're going to be, hopefully we'll have big smiles on. Again, unplug it one more time. September 30th, we're doing an event in Round Rock. I'll put it in the description of the video, Women Leaving the Left. Last time we had lots of protesters. I don't know if it'll be that crazy this time. That's why you got to get armed with the smile ahead of time.
Yeah.
Like, if there's crazy people there. Anyway. Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you.
Good day.
You too.
Cool. And thank you guys for hanging out in chat.